Saib, is it fair to say that Twitter, Facebook, all social media is probably at its most bipolar right now? Like, people are absolutely in a state of jubilation because of how good Elden Ring is. And then on the other side of social media, everybody's despairing at all the Ukraine and Russia stuff. Has there ever been a time where it was worse than that?
Where it's like depressing, like just absolutely depressing in one moment, and then absolutely like, wow, this is amazing in the other moment. I think there are a couple of events that probably were like a little bit higher, but yeah, it's pretty insane right now.
Maybe
like,
when The Last Jedi came out?
Maybe.
I'm being facetious, by the way. There's no comparison, like, in terms of terrible things when it comes to war. Just trying to make light of the situation, guys. Please don't go all aggro on me.
It's tough. It's tough. It's tough. And again, there's so much disinformation and bizarre information and other stuff going on. It's like and it really depends on who you're looking at. So I have sources and I have like people I can trust that are reporting stuff, and we're just now finally starting to get that as far as like, what's actually going on like over there, like what's actually like happening on the ground, because it's not that people on the ground there are lying, it's that there's a bunch of jokers on the internet that think that it's funny to like make up stories and do things for who knows what reason. So it's always been the difficult thing, right? Yeah. Is trying to like sort fact from fiction, and it's always been a bigger problem than most people have realized their entire life. We can look back at certain reporting from like 50, 60 years ago and see that it was a problem back then. Even before that, there was a news broadcaster that was in the 1920s, and he would read stories about like local heroes and local like sports stories. Like 90% of it was made up.
Yep.
Like just like information was wrong, he wasn't getting the right story, names were sometimes wrong, events were sometimes wrong, and then it was always like the growing story, right? Like, Farmer Bob, his son there, Farmer Bobby, he hit a home run, and the ball went all the way to the next county. It's stuff like that, where it's like, right. it's inflated by the locals, and this is how, in some ways, this is how mythology starts, really. Local people made up stories, saw something, and then that something turned into something else, and then that something else turned into something else, and then it just kind of carried on from there, and you can kind of track it. It's like it's kind of sad, after the fact, because you realize that some of the stories that started were actually pretty terrible. So, yeah. But yeah, let's not get too depressing today.
Yes, we actually I think we have more good stuff to share with you guys today than negative stuff, surprisingly. Let's start off with the aforementioned Elden Ring. I did say last week that I'd only been able to play a few hours of the game, and I was only able to give initial impressions, and I promised that this week I would have played enough to be able to give a full-on review of the game. Saib, have you played it yet?
Elden Ring? No, I'm waiting for mods.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
I am legitimately waiting for mods. I have been pulling some legs every once in a while. There's some people who've been playing it in the Discord, and there was one fellow who was really, 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 really tired, and I started making up weapons. I started with a real one, and then I started just making up like more and more ridiculous weapons. And I got like 6 or 7 in before he finally caught on that that I was making stuff up.
What, telling him to go find fake weapons?
Yeah. So I started with like he's having a hard time with the boss. I'm like, well, are you using the gravity samurai sword? And he's like, I have that one. Is that one better? I'm like, well, that one's better, but you probably want to go with the Hypergate Mace. The Hypergate Mace is just really, really good. But if you combine the Hyper Mace with the Gravity Sword, you actually create the Solar System Sword, and that'll one-shot anything. But wow, wait, how do you do that? It's like, oh, well, you see the biggest mountain in the game? You got to climb all the way to the top of that, and there's a forge up there, and I'm just making this stuff up. Like, this is not real at all. I'm just making this up on the fly. But because he's been playing for 40 hours and he's sleep deprived, he's like trying to figure it out. And yes, I will troll you sometimes, lovingly, of course, if you're playing 40 hours in a row on our server. Oh, I might troll you. Just a little bit, but it's all in fun. I didn't make him climb the mountain. I just told him he might want to start thinking about it. And as soon as he starts thinking about it, he's like, man, I gotta go to bed. I'm like, yeah, because everything I told you just made up. So
jeez. You had a guy who was playing the game for 40 hours straight?
Yeah.
Oh man, how cool of a temperament does that guy have?
I don't know. I think he was probably like fueled on, probably way too much Rockstar drink. The drink, not the company, obviously. It's probably fueled on way too much of that and chips and sugar. So
Yeah.
I would surmise that's how most 18-year-olds manage to do it.
Oh, okay. Well, if he's all right, that probably just answered my question. It's the fact
Yeah,
that
no,
he's 18 years old.
most people have a thing called a job to go to. So
Yeah.
you can't always play a game for 40 hours straight. But some people can.
Well, I have had the ability to do that because my current job is full-time YouTube, although I am looking to move away from that into coaching and counseling. But yeah, sorry, back to Elden Ring. Let me give my full review of the game. I've had the opportunity to put 45 plus hours into the game. I think I have a pretty decent appreciation of all the things that the game has to offer, even though I haven't gotten to the very end of it. I'm only actually about halfway through it, based on all the information I could gather. But despite all that, I can say basically what everybody else on the internet is saying. The game is a masterpiece in virtually every possible way. Like, every discipline that has gone into this game is state of the art. There are a few criticisms that I have of the game, but they're not big enough that they actually take away from the overall experience. So, in the spirit of trying to just provide positive things to celebrate for this particular episode, let's jump right into why this game exactly is a masterpiece. Starting with the gameplay. It's the best that we've ever gotten from a From Software game, in my opinion. I've played all of them, like the major ones, like Demon Souls, the Dark Souls games, Bloodborne, and I played a bit of Sekiro. Never played any of the Kingsfield games, though. But then again, virtually nobody has. But yeah, compared to the games that I have played, it's probably the best version of it. It's definitely the most approachable combat system and spec system that we've had so far. Everything is easy to use. You can mix up your build. So if you want to be if you want to deal physical damage most of the time with swords and axes and stuff like that, you can just focus on that and you'll be fine. Same if you just want to do a magic build, or you can mix things up. You can do both and try to create strategies around facing bosses that way. I probably wouldn't recommend that for your first time out. But who knows? It might work just fine for you. What else? Exploration. Absolutely the best in the series. Like we said on last week's podcast side, it's not a series of linear dungeons that you go through that take you to various bosses. The game is open world. And it's amazing how well the Souls formula mirrors no, that's not the right word. Sorry, that's my dad yelling at the dog. It's amazing how well the game fits in with the open world formula. The exploration is, when you're just running around, obviously what comes to mind is Shadow of the Colossus, running around a big, wide open, mysterious world. You don't understand why the land is the way that it is, why these giant monsters are there. And you definitely get that feeling of awe and isolation that you got from Shadow of the Colossus in that game. But unlike Shadow of the Colossus, you have more than 16 places to go, because, Shadow of the Colossus, it's 16 bosses and the traveling in between them. Whereas with this game, it's roughly 100 bosses plus various many things that you can do throughout the land. It's ridiculous. You can find a whole bunch of awesome items, weapons, enchantments, armor pieces, and every time you pick one up, even if it's not something that's something that is relevant to your character's builds, like let's say you get a set of mage robes and you're more of like a heavy tanky type of player. Well, even when I get those robes, I immediately go into my inventory and I look at the item description and the price, and it always feels like treasure. You know what I mean? It always feels like something special. The combat. Obviously, these games are well known for their addictive combat. I mean, Demon's Souls came out in 2009, and the formula hasn't declined in quality for the last 12 years. And I would say that with Elden Ring, it's probably the best version of it. That said, some people might prefer the combat that we got in Sekiro, where it's more around blocking and breaking people's posture. That's fine. I'm more of a fan of the way that Dark Souls did their combat, and the addition of things like a jump button and the ability to stagger your opponents are very much welcome additions. So that's everything in regards to gameplay. I have absolutely no complaints about it. It's fantastic. Graphics. Easily best looking From Software game. Everything from the dense foliage of the forests, like individual blades of grass and it just, oh my god. And the variety of colors. There are landscapes like full of green, and then there are landscapes of amber, like you would see with leaves on the ground in the fall. And then some really horrific, I don't want to spoil it just in case you haven't gotten to these points in the game, but some of the horror eldritch elements that are intertwined with the way that the worlds of the Lands Between and Elden Ring are designed, it's really, really unsettling, but it's so cool, you know what I mean? And then one thing I want to give a particular shout out to is something that I really appreciate in my games, because I'm kind of a graphics junkie. There's this thing in games called LOD, which stands for level of detail. And this is the stuff that you see when you're looking off into the far distance. How do the things off in the far distance look? If you play like some of the old Bethesda RPGs and you try to look at, say, the Imperial City in Oblivion, it doesn't look that great, especially with the area surrounding it. But with the From Software games, ever since the first Dark Souls, like far off detailed environments look gorgeous. And Elden Ring, once again, I believe has the best versions of that. It's like when you're looking off into the distance, it looks just as good as it does when you're looking at things up front. That's something that we've rarely ever had in most games that have ever come out, and Elden Ring seems to provide that to us. All right, let's see what else. The music. It's hard to say if the music in this game is the best that From Software has ever done, but then again, that's too high a bar, because the music in some of these games are so epic and at times also so relaxing, especially with Bloodborne. I think that probably has to be my favorite soundtrack out of all these games. So I might have to spend like several more hours with the game before I can determine where the music sort of stands with the rest of the From Software canon, but it's still gorgeous, and I never get tired of hearing it. And I can already say that a couple of the boss fights have absolutely standout tracks. And then, let's see. Yeah, like I said earlier, the world is overwhelmingly huge. I'm almost at 50 hours into the game, only about halfway. On your first run through, that means it'll take you about 100 hours if you're wanting to get absolutely everything. And keep in mind that the From Software games, they are sort of meant to be played multiple times so that you can try different builds and probably set more challenges for you to try out at later dates. So I can imagine people playing this game just like they have been playing all the other Souls games for several years to come. Now, with all that said, I do have a few negatives that I want to point out. Like I said last week, there are serious problems with the frame rate in this game. Most of the time, it does maintain a solid 60 FPS, both on the consoles and on the PC. I've been playing it on both. Unfortunately, particularly on the PC, there are times where the game just stutters like crazy, and like it'll even freeze for like a second or two, and then it's like it's trying to catch up with yourself. And this is especially annoying when you're in the middle of boss fights, because it makes your heart sort of jump up into your throat and you feel like you're gonna have a panic attack. But like From Software has said that they are aware of the issue and they are going to fix it. Many of the boss types are repeated, like not just 2 or 3 times, but like 5 or 6 times. And sometimes with a couple of the characters, it's actually even more than that. It's not a serious problem because, like I said, there are roughly 100 bosses and most of them are unique, but enough of them aren't unique that it becomes noticeable. There's some problems with the online co-op. The approach to exploration and not really having a clear way to go might not be for everybody, but that's pretty much it. This game, I would recommend to people who might be reticent about trying to play some of these games because, anybody who's never played these games and have heard about them have heard that they are notoriously hard. I would say don't worry about that. If you're new to these games and you're worried about the difficulty, this game, even though it does have some of the hardest bosses, it also has some of the easiest ones. And like I said, the game is so open. There's so many things that you can do that you can choose your own approach, and you will eventually get the hang of things, and you will get addicted to it. And it's not as much of a learning curve as it is for the other games. So that's my full review. I think it's a masterpiece. The only other game that I can imagine coming out this year that I think would maybe beat it, based on everything that we've heard about, is Starfield. But I think Elden Ring has just set the bar too high that unless Bethesda just makes one of the greatest games they ever made, there's no chance. Elden Ring, awesome.
Are you sure though? Because I'm hearing a lot of chatter about this competitor game to Elden Ring called Babylon's Fall.
What?
It's got similar boss fights and it's got a microtransaction store where you can literally spend hundreds of dollars to get, a chance to get, it's a really small chance to get something cool, but it's like microtransactions, man. Does Elden Ring have a microtransaction center? I don't know.
Do I look like the guy that was playing in your server a couple days ago?
Square Enix, they're pulling out all this. I think it's Square Enix. I have to double check.
Platinum Games.
Yeah. So yeah, you're sure that Babylon's Fall is not going to compete with Elden Ring?
I would be willing to put money on it. And I'm not much of a gambler, but I'd be willing to put a couple $100 down that Babylon's Fall is not going to beat Elden Ring for Game of the Year. At least based on what I'm hearing. As sad as it is to say, because Platinum Games, I do love them. They gave us...
I don't know what they were thinking when they made this. I have no idea what they were thinking, other than, hey, let's see how fast we can destroy our reputation. CDPR did a pretty good job of it, a little while ago. Let's see if we can like pull this out ahead and try and like double down on this, because we just want to ruin ourselves. It's like this thing is an unmitigated disaster, and that's not me saying that. That's the 400 people playing it on Steam.
That's so sad, man. Like, these are the guys that made Bayonetta, Metal Gear Rising, Nier, and what else? Like, they were gonna make Scalebound, right? Please go back to making games like that. What the hell's the matter with you, Platinum Games?
I don't know what happened here. All I can say is that I assume that the allure of microtransaction store, 4-person co-op battle game, it just was too much for them to resist, and they just had to throw their reputation out with the bathwater, because the stuff and things and microtransactions, and hey, get into a game, and but you know what the dumb thing is that there's always somebody in there who goes in and immediately drops like 4K on the game. Mm-hmm. It's like, why? What possible reason could you have to do this?
Yeah.
It's like I've been playing Lost Ark for nearing 400 hours. It's ridiculous.
What?
Yeah, I know. I looked at it now. Some of that is me just like AFKing in the game, because there's a lot of There's a lot of AFK type mechanics. Sorry, not 400, 340. That's probably a little bit more accurate.
Okay.
So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of me just staring at builds too, and just messing around while I'm doing other work. So it's not all playtime. It's an MMO, so it's open, almost all day long, and I'm tabbing in and out from it. But still, I have not spent more than $50 on this game. I haven't even spent half of that. I bought the early access for $13. And then that's been it. And I look at the other people playing these heavy microtransaction games from these companies that we used to be able to trust, and I'm like, why? Yeah. Why spend the ridiculously ludicrous amounts of money for this garbage? it just it really boggles my mind. It really does boggle my
It's
mind.
people who are ridiculously rich and don't have enough money that they don't have to work or really be involved with the way that the world works or how anything works, and then they just look at something and be like, "Oh, that looks okay. I'll put a whole bunch of money into it, just because I have that kind of disposable income," and then they just have the privilege of being able to live unconsciously like that.
Yeah, not good. Not good. I would say not good at all.
You know what I said about, trying to keep this particular show about positive stuff, and then, but sorry, like, I'm just joking. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, well, I was gonna segue into the next topic if you were done.
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah, go buy Elden
Yeah.
Ring, please. It's amazing. It is as good as everybody says it is.
It's really good. I am like I said, I will probably dip my toes into the game once modding has really taken off in it. And it's not that I'm saying that because I'm like, I want mods. I don't like the base game the way it is. It's that Lost Ark and a couple of these other things and a whole bunch of like projects and a whole bunch of work stuff is mostly like keeping my attention on right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I simply just don't. I just do not have the time for this at all.
Yeah.
That and I will be honest. I need the game to be a little bit more pretty as far as characters goes, because right now, I'm not clicking with the with any of the characters. Like, role playing the what's the guy with the steel ball on his head. Playing the man in the iron mask is not exactly my definition of fun.
All right. And dying 50 times on one boss, that's not your definition of fun?
I hate to say this, but I don't think I would die that much. I really don't.
Okay. Wait until you get to Godric the Grafted.
I did a hard mode run in Code Vein after I beat the base game, and I died, I think, maybe 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
And now I do believe, I think overall most people are saying that Code Vein is an easier game, and I get that, but I still think I wouldn't have that hard of a time.
All right. Well, we'll see when you get to those big bosses.
That's not me saying I'm better than everyone. I'm just saying that, that when it comes to like hardcore like mechanics and stuff like that, like I was training and growing up on this stuff like 20 years ago. Like hard mode, like high end content in a bunch of games were like my bread and butter. And it's like I did the Batman line the other day. Let's see if I can reproduce it. I'm like, oh, so you play? Somebody was asking me, are you going to play it? I'm like, you like the challenge? Oh yeah, it's very difficult. I'm like, are you sure it's very difficult? And they're like, yes. I'm like, have you ever played Avoid the Noid? And they're like, what's that? And I'm like, oh, son, you have no idea. I was born in the darkness. It's like you play 100 levels of Avoid the Noid with 3 lives. Get to the top and discover that you need a password to enter the penthouse, and you got to backtrack through 30, 40 floors to get back to that. I'm not saying it's harder than Elden Ring, but I'm just saying that if you grow up on that, this is not something that's too terribly hard. And again, kudos and bonus points to everybody who knows what Avoid the Noid is, and especially remembers that. I'm pretty sure it was a Family Guy reference to it, but yeah. Just spectacular, painful game.
So what you're saying is your punishment must be more severe, Mr. Wayne. All right. So next story. What's going on? Yeah, Steamdeck has come out, right? And it's killing it.
Yeah, so Steamdeck is out, and it's motoring right along. And it's not just motoring right along. One of the things that's really cool about it, and about the launch that's been very interesting, is to see what Gabe is saying about it, to see what he's talking about it.
Mhm.
And the other thing is that there's been a bunch of rumors like, oh, Gabe Newell's handing out, he's delivering,
The decks.
he's
Yeah.
he's actually delivering the decks. That's actually true.
Yep. That's cool.
So that I think is, yeah, that is pretty darn cool.
And he's signing a couple of them too. I wish that's one good reason out of very few to live in the Seattle area. I'm just joking, by the way. Don't hate me if you live in the Seattle area, but go ahead. Sorry, what is he saying about other stuff?
So he had a big conversation about about NFTs and cryptocurrencies, and it was interesting to hear that when they were doing NFTs and cryptocurrencies for the for Steam, just the regular Steam sales, he discovered that 50% of the purchases coming in were reported to be fraudulent or stolen. And at that point, he said, "We don't want these people as our customers. If 50% of them are
Scamming.
stealing this stuff or scamming or reporting this stuff," and it's curious as to how that happened. Like, it's very curious. Like, how did that happen? How did we get to this point where this is a thing, right? And so it's interesting to note. And then he was talking about the NFTs and how they were looking at it, and how, like, so a lot of the games that have been, a lot of these NFT related games that are coming out, like, oh yeah, we're gonna have this game. Here's a video of it, and they show this video of, like, a character running through a couple biomes and some monsters and some graphics, some attacks. And he mentioned, and other people have been mentioning this too, that for crying out loud, there are some serious problems with this. There are some very, very serious problems with these games, and most of it boils down to the fact that, just on the surface, a lot of these things are just asset flips in which there's no programming, very little to no programming involved. Mm-hmm. in these videos that people are getting of these NFT games. And he's like, this is not credible. This isn't something you should be putting your money into. This is not something that you should be assuming that you're going to have a good investment in. These are unequivocally scams, basically. This is basically, Gabe coming out and talking about this stuff and giving them very, 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 very negative reviews. So, where that goes from here, I don't know, because, and we can look at the games that have already come out, and they're really bad. I mean, they're really, 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 really bad.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's kind of like where we're at as far as that goes. Gabe had a lot of, like, the conversation. We reported on this on the midweek show, and it was bad. It was rough, what we saw then and what we were talking about then. But listening to him talk about it more right now, it's even more so. I would say it's even something more that you have to be kind of keeping your eye out for on these games, on these products, because, again, you think that you're going to be, you're making a good investment, you're going to see something out of this. We saw with, Kickstarter and a bunch of these other companies that raising money straight out for game development is not a very good thing to do. Mm-hmm. It's not going to get you a lot of bang for your buck. Now, supporting an artist through Patreon is a really good way of doing it, because every month you're seeing, the updated builds.
Yeah.
You're seeing the output, you're seeing the advancement in this direction. And I got to say that way that's going, that is way more, 100 times more trustworthy than what we're seeing coming out of out of these Kickstarter, and especially these NTF type games, where they're promising you the moon and they're showing you a bunch of asset flips. It's like, you can't trust that. Like don't be taken advantage of. You cannot trust this. These people are they're making these things, and then there's no way that you can get your money back on this stuff. And lawsuits are really, I mean, they're very expensive, and they're very muddy, and there's no guarantee that they'll even work in most of these cases. So that's been the problem. That's been the downside of what we've been seeing here with these products and with these with the directions of this stuff. And again, I want to reiterate that if you've got a content creator making a game on Patreon, you're way likely to see, a greater success for that. And in a lot of cases, you're seeing that only for $1 a month, right?
Yeah.
Like there are some who, they charge like 20 or 5 to 10, maybe $2-3 to get like early access into the builds. But as somebody who consumes a lot of that content, who consults for a lot of these people, that's working. It's working because it's been done right. It's been done in a healthy way that has some serious progress that you can attract and attach to it, versus this random stuff where it's like it's so. And again, I don't want to say it's fake, but it's not like
it's kind of sketchy.
It's very sketchy. Just with the way that they're trying to build it up, just the way that they're trying to establish it as a generalized concept. There's very little like confirmation. There's no like holding your foot to the fire, so to speak, on it. You're just told, buckle up and enjoy the ride, and then 4 years later, 2 years later, in some cases even less than that, we ran out of money, and the games just didn't go over very well. It's like, okay, right, that's not healthy. So Gabe is keeping his eye on this stuff, and he seems very interested in this. Other companies, and we all know this, other companies would be like, what? We can take advantage of players and they'll just take their money and then not actually deliver on something? Well, hey, let's do that. I mean, bottom line, baby, bottom line.
Yeah.
And that's all they care about. But it's nice to see that Gabe, that's not his focus. His focus is only what makes the platform, what makes PC gaming better, what makes it healthier, what makes it more interesting, what makes it more appropriate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's been his focus from early on. And I think this is a good thing, especially in the days where you can't trust what's coming out. And if I had to pick a platform permanently, I Steam, hands down, 100%.
Sure.
Like if I had to kill off, another, the other two platforms, like that would be an easy pick for me, because you don't have Sony and Microsoft coming out with a whole bunch of indie projects that they don't even like or agree with, but they're saying, we're going to give you this because that seems to be the right thing to do. It's like, you don't have that at all, not in the slightest. So
yeah, it seems like it's a win-win situation for Gabe to sort of go against the NFT stuff, because Valve and Steam already make more money than Jesus, Allah, and the Queen combined. So by dissing this particular market, it's not really going to affect his and the company's bottom line. Plus, he gets some.
Well, I mean, he could sell out, and that's my point. Is like he could very easily sell out, and in just install this massive NFT thing into it. I mean, they could launch their own NFT, and I think that might actually be, have some value to it. But instead of that, he's going, no, this stuff just smells too greasy, and it looks too greasy, and it feels too greasy. So the answer is no. We're not going to do this. We're not going to allow you to do this.
Yeah.
So
and I hope that that's the way that he continues to go, because it's like he does appreciate what it means to maintain a good reputation, and I think by being able to diss them, it sort of puts him in good with the rest of the gaming community. So yeah, good for Gabe, and I hope that things continue to go well, and hopefully they'll go well enough that he'll be able to address the one major criticism that I have of his company, which is that they don't know how to count to 3. But anyways, back to the whole Steam Deck thing. There's one other thing that I wanted to say about it before we moved on. Now that it's out, people have been using the system to emulate games from legacy platforms. This was sort of one of the things that we suspected would happen when the thing was originally announced, and now people are doing it full on, playing PS1 games and Dreamcast games and N64 games using emulators on the Steam Deck. Now here's the problem. There is a emulator for a console that millions of people continue to use worldwide currently, and that's the Nintendo Switch. And this emulator actually works really, really well on the Steam Deck. There was this YouTuber named The Fox, spelled Phawx, because of course. He released a video showing a Switch emulator working on the Steam Deck, and get this side, it apparently works so well that it emulates Super Mario Galaxy better than the Switch does. Like, it operates it at a higher frame rate.
I am in no way, shape, or form surprised.
Yeah.
I'm really not. And I think for a long time now, one of Nintendo's biggest failures is their inability to realize that they have a bigger platform off their own platform than they do on their platform. And by that I mean that if they opened up emulators on Microsoft, PlayStation, PC, Steam, and your mobile phone, where you could play their entire library, it would cost you like $4 or $5 for a game from the first generation, $7-8 from the second, then they're just kind of racking it up there to you're paying a current price to play, the current game that they released last month on your mobile phone, if your mobile phone could run it. And all they do is just create emulators and sell people actual controllers that fit into their phones, or an actual controller that you can connect to your computer or PlayStation or Xbox, whatever. If they just did that, I guarantee you they would probably be making 4 to 5 times the amount of profit overnight, and they would probably become a household name, or stay the household name for the next 50 years.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that if they just did this, it would make so much sense, but they don't. They refuse to. They stay in the hardware game, despite the ability that they're just like, they're okay at it. They're not good at it. They're just okay. They get lucky with a handful of events, a handful of releases, and then that's been it. And they haven't really succeeded anywhere else. And you look at them, you shake your head, and you're like, why are you so opposed to just making this work for people who want it to just work? Like, why are you so opposed to this? Why do you refuse to accept this? And they don't seem to have an answer for that question. They just don't. They seem to be like, dead set on, no, we're going to stay in this game. We're going to stay in the hardware game. We're going to stay in the software game. We're gonna keep making these things, and we're not going to allow our players to play on other things that they want to play on. Mm-hmm. And that just blows my mind. It literally just confuses me. Mm-hmm. Why not? What are you losing? You're not, and the answer is they're not losing anything. And that's the difficulty of trying to figure out, why on earth they can't seem to function as a company in some cases. Not in all cases, just in some cases when it comes to we're having financial difficulties. Well, have you tried, creating an emulator or just buying the rights to an emulator that somebody has, albeit it is illegal? Mm-hmm. Why haven't you just approached one of these groups, be like, hey, you guys are really good at this whole thing. What would it cost, And the thing is it probably wouldn't even cost them anything. Yeah. They're probably like, hey, we're not going to push charges. We want to bring you on as like employees. And they would probably, everybody would immediately say yes that's involved in these projects.
Yeah.
They would probably go, yes, please. And then they would probably make $1 billion in the next couple of weeks by selling just the Nintendo One lineup.
Yeah.
And it would probably just be so healthy for them. But again, they can't seem to stop themselves from being their own worst enemy. I don't get it. I don't understand why they're doing it like this, and why they've continued to do it like this, and why they continue to refuse to do anything.
Right. So I agree with everything you said, but in regards to the Switch emulator, I do understand some problems that Nintendo has with people emulating off of that system, because it is a relatively new one. They're still selling Switch units. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I say that, and why we're talking about this in the first place, is that, well, Nintendo has been taking down videos showing people how to emulate Nintendo Switch games on the Steamdeck. Like including the one by the Fox, the one that I just brought up before. And I get it, because why would you get a Nintendo Switch if you can just emulate all their games off of the Steam Deck for free? Mm-hmm. And, like you said, that's illegal. I mean, emulation, like using emulators is legal. What might not be legal is where you get your ROMs. Like those are the things you put into the emulators and use those for games. And oftentimes, people who use emulators, they're not really, putting their disk into their computer disk drive and putting the ROM onto the computer and using that to emulate. Yeah. So
that's what I mean. It's like, yes, technically that's legal, but we all know that that's not
how it works. Yeah,
that's not what they're actually doing with that. And we have to kind of like nod at that. And again, it's like they're their own worst enemy on this, because again, they could be making a lot of money by just doing something differently, but they're not, and it's sad.
Well, let's hope that because they are doing this and the inevitable Streisand effect that sort of comes out of it, that something like this will sort of motivate them to sort of pursue creating their own platform where you can play all these games on your phone with a dedicated controller, stuff like that. But something just tells me that they're just going to continue to be stubborn about this, and they'll be sort of like the Nintendo that they were a few years ago, when they were just DMCAing any sort of video on YouTube that included footage from their games, right? But we'll see. Okay, we're sort of running out of time. I got to go in a few minutes.
I mean, Kotaku is on strike. Good luck with that, guys.
Okay.
That's basically all I got to add in for that.
Why are they on strike?
Working conditions, and I mean, they're making like $100,000 a year, but they have to live in these cities where the rent is like $200,000 a year,
like San Francisco.
And they just don't like that. Plus, they want to have more respect, and they want to be taken more seriously. And all these other things, and again, I'm not hoping that they, I'm not wishing any ill on them, but their venture capital, which was the only thing that was paying their wages for the longest time, has basically run out.
Yeah.
So it is dried up, so to speak.
That's what happens when you're Kotaku.
And now they have a serious problem. And the serious problem is that, hey, turns out nobody wants to pay you to do what you're doing, because you're not actually good at what you do. I mean, I hate to say it. Kotaku and all these other companies, you're just not good at what you do. Mm-hmm. It really just stems from this hatred of gamers in general. Instead of like being bringing positivity and like, hey, let's talk this out, let's come up with some real let's talk about real problems and real solutions, instead of talking about stuff like that. The real solutions. What's a real solution? What's a real problem?
Say that the consumers are all terrible people?
Well, yeah, that's their solution to one of the problems. Yeah.
Hmm.
One of the problems I would say, as far as like why they want more women in gaming, right? So they want more women in gaming. A very positive thing to want, actually. And I'm
Yeah, that's
not being
fine.
facetious. I think that is legitimately an important thing for the gaming community.
It's
I
just how you
really,
it's just how you go
yeah,
about it.
yeah, and one of the things that is key that we can see, there's a little bit of biology to it, but it's like the FPS games are designed, by and for men who track things movement wise, better than women do, because of a way that the brain interprets, and the way that the brain interacts with the eye in young men versus young women.
Hmm.
And it's like, one of the things that they could do is they could start to design games that cater to that, or that give access, or give some flexibility, uh,
For both.
to the for both, or focus on the strong suit that young women's eyes are designed for. Because again, they're why are the top 100 people in FPS esports arenas all the same type of people? Well, it's like, because it's designed literally for them. It's like it's biologically and brain chemistry wise is created for them to react in the way that is designed. It's like, we can come up with ways that do that, work outside of that, but there's very little interest in doing it, because right now what they have works, as far as like, bringing in profits and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So what more could you do? Well, there's a whole bunch of things that you could do. There's a whole bunch of conversations you could have on the matter. But instead of coming forward and saying, hey, here's some questions, and we would really love to be able to get people's input on this, and to create a conversation, that's a healthy conversation. That's never been what they've been interested in, because that doesn't sell clicks. That doesn't farm clicks. What farms clicks is when you call a bunch of those people, names, and
Yeah.
say that they're the devil. And when you do that, then suddenly, you're getting all these clicks, and some of them are hate clicks. But hey, in the industry, a hate click is worth just as much as a love click.
Yeah.
But you can farm hate clicks easier. So they created their own Burning Man here, essentially. In that yeah, when you set it on fire, it was really cool and it flamed everywhere. But you know what? It's not going to last as long as a statue lasts. It's not going to last as long as an actual monument lasts. It's just going to be cool while it's burning, and then you're going to have nothing left, and then everybody's going to go home, which is exactly what's happened with the financial backing of these groups. And again, it could have been fixed properly. Like, it could legitimately have been like, hey guys, let's have an actual conversation. Let's offer some rewards for companies that can think outside the box, and maybe that will spur interest in the community. We've seen games do this when they come up with like actual appropriate responses to stuff. And strangely enough, in most of those cases, people that work at, or people that are like, the diehard supporters of the people who work at these publications, they entirely back the hatred and the vitriol, and target it against the people who are actually trying to bring in actual solutions.
Yeah.
Like saying, hey, I think I have a solution to this problem. Here, let me show you the things that I've noticed. I mean, they butchered a guy who tried to do that. All he was doing was responding to feedback, and it's like, all right,
I know who you're talking about.
well, if you're not interested in the feedback, then what are you interested in? We're interested in hate. Don't you understand? We're interested in hate
And ideological hegemony.
and the screaming of that just doesn't stop, right?
Yeah.
And so, and again, it's like I'm not, the answers to this is to have more healthier conversation, and that's not something that Kotaku has been interested in for a very long time, because the leads at that company blocked people who tried to engage them in actual conversation. When we pointed out, hey, it seems that your company has some financial incentive to cause, hatred and to stir up problems because, you own these companies. Immediately blocked. Mm-hmm. There was no conversation. There was no interaction. It's just immediately blocked, and they called us like trolls. And it's like, well, we're bringing out a very valid point to you, and that's your response, which doesn't actually help your side very much. So no, when your company starts failing, I'm not exactly, gonna go out of my way to help you out. I'm just gonna probably ignore you or kind of point out all your failures so that, when the next round of these investments come to actually build up something, maybe for once they'll actually look at doing the smart thing. And the smart thing is actually creating an audience that's engaged with them in a helpful way than not. And one more story. We mentioned this once or twice before. We brought a story that was kind of like a positive news thing to one of these big outlets. And we brought it forward. We said, here's all the information on it. And they told us, sorry, the information here is too positive. Positivity doesn't sell. Come back to us when you have something that's, more negative, where we can burn someone at the stake, essentially. Jeez. And that was the response there that we got from these people. And so, that's the kind of people that we're working with, where they're far more interested in somebody's house burning down, with them still in it, than they are in like, hey, neighbor helps his neighbor, rebuild their house after a fire. It's like they're not interested in those kinds of stories. Those are feel good stories that happen every once in a while. Well, maybe your entire concept of news and encouragement on this aspect is what's causing the problem to begin with.
Yeah. It might help you in the moment, but in the long term, just promoting that kind of negativity, it doesn't get you anywhere meaningful or lucrative. And now they're looking at their venture capital supporters, like the masses that looked up at Rorschach and Watchmen, asking for them to save Kotaku. And the venture capitalists are like Rorschach, and they're like, no. So, but where you can get, positive news coverage, healthy news coverage, it's here on Triple S Podcast and with the Triple S League. And I think you guys recognize that because that's why you're listening to us. And we're so terribly glad that you decide to support this podcast, tuning in every week, commenting, liking. It helps us out a lot. And hopefully with that type of support, we can get to a point where we can replace news outlets that just report negative news and nothing constructive, just so you can burn people at the stake. But here we try to do it in a way that is constructive. And I do that largely thanks to the help of my co-host, Sybsidian. Let's wrap things up right now, Syb. Where can people find you online and tell them about the other channel?
We're always on most things called the Triple S League. We're starting to get up, like we're on Twitter. I don't tweet too much there. I'm the only person who's on there. Mm-hmm. We're going to be trying to get on some of these other platforms coming up here soon. So just basically like literally anywhere and everywhere. We've been really like trying to expand out to as many places as you can. So just look up me, Sybsidian, or look up the Triple S League. Triple S League is typically the first one that we set up.
Nice. And you guys can just find me on all the regular Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, just at Max Derrat. I'll put links to that and anything else that I might have forgotten in the description box below. All right, that's it. I gotta go meet up with my girlfriend. We're gonna do, what else are we gonna do? We're gonna play Elden Ring together. Syb, have a good rest of your week, and everybody else that's listening, have a good rest of your week. And until we do this again next week, just want to remind you, as always and as per usual, stay yellow.
Goodbye.